Since 1989, fans of the Indiana Jones series had to wait till 2008 when one of the most anticipated movies of the year would becoming a steaming pile of garbage that it makes us afraid for the upcoming Dial of Destiny sequel. Instead of fixing something that can't be fixed, we are going to rewrite it as a whole new story. The movie will be renamed Indiana Jones and the Ring of Solomon. It begins with a rabbi and a few followers running from Roman officers. They end up crossing the Persian border holding an artifact, which contains a ring and a seal on top of an encasing. The rabbi gives it to one of the locals to hide it beneath a temple in Khuzestan till they are caught by the Romans. Fast forward to July of 1953 and Indy still teaches at Marshall College. He's 54 years old, and doesn't have a whole lot of gray hair, but by the end of the movie he stops dyeing his hair with henna. Indy is visited by a beautiful CIA agent during class. She believes that before Stalin's death the Soviets were ordered to find the Ring of Solomon in Imperial Persia, and they may have actually found the temple where it was buried. However, when Stalin died earlier in March, they called off the excavation. Indy is intrigued. He talks about how the ring should be of brass and iron, engraved by God. He has read it could be used to control what the Jewish and Islamic traditions believe to be the Shadim or Jinn. He says that Josephus the historian mentioned a ring was being used in the presence of the Roman Emperor Vespasian and wonders if there is a connection. He also read that it could be used to control the wind. The agent wants Indy to go with her to find the artifact before it falls into the wrong hands. Since the current government there is friendly to the Soviets, they will have to pose as Russians and Indy will have to brush up on his Russian skills, which he says he hasn't spoken it in years but is still fluent in the language. They travel to Egypt first and Indy meets with his old friend Salah, who tells them the story of the Ring of Solomon. Indy takes a liking to the agent, and they start to get to know one another even though she tries to ignore Indy's charm. They then head to Persia and speak to a contact to find the location of the temple. However, the contact warns that group of gangsters led by a man known as the Padishah are now after the ring, but the government has closed off the temple site. He says that he is surprised that the Soviets have returned again after promising they would leave. The contact grows suspicious about the two and the local police arrive, which ends up in a chase, leaving Indy on his own. He takes a horse and rides out. He manages to hide in a market as the gangsters leave. He sighs with a grin. He wakes up in a bed and happens to find an older Short Round. Short Round, who says to call him just Lee, blames Indy for his divorce with one of Salah's daughters. He blames him for setting it up in the first place and for neglect. Indy says he'll make it up to him but wants to know what he's doing here. Lee says he followed Indy from Egypt and says he doesn't trust his lady friend, and Indy says she's probably long gone now. Later the gangsters finally return and our heroes are captured. The Padishah appears and says he knows who Mr. Jones is and that he wants him to find the artifact or his captured CIA girlfriend will lose her life. Indy complies. Indy enters a chamber underneath the temple with Lee, and they have to go through booby traps and other obstacles. Indy uses his whip to get across a bottomless pit but struggles with it, saying he's getting a little too old for this. He finally gets across. Later Lee gets trapped by an arrow wound. Indy says he'll get the ring himself and to hang tight. Indy finally makes it and finds 3 different boxes. Reading his diary, he wants to verify which one is the proper seal of Solomon. He grabs the right box and says it's too easy. Unfortunately, the CIA agent reveals herself as a double agent named Irina working for the KGB and takes a hold of the artifact with some of the gang members. Indy and Lee are handed over to local authorities as grave robbers. On their way to jail, Lee has a trick up his sleeve and manages to help Indy escape and steal the vehicle. The gangsters start to chase down Indy. They end up in the desert and a massive sandstorm appears. Indy and Lee drive right into it. In a large pile of sand, everyone starts to get out of their vehicles. Indy's vehicle ends up in quicksand and he struggles to get an injured Lee out. Indy shouts that he can't let Lee die and with all of his strength saves him. Meanwhile, Irina gets angry and finds out the ring is missing. They chase after our heroes. Indy and Lee run into the desert in the scorching heat. They take a breather and Lee talks about how he saw Mr. Jones like a father, that he wanted to be like him. Indy gives him his hat and says he's sorry and that he should have wrote to him and been there for him. Lee says he really loved her and shouldn't be blaming Indy. Indy wraps a piece of his shirt over his head and says he'll find a way out of all of this. But it's too bad the Soviets now have the ring. Lee says they should go, but Indy says it's just too hot and he's really tired. Suddenly a strong breeze of cool air comes and Lee takes an object out of his pocket. It's the ring. Indy grins. Our heroes get to a nearby town where Indy makes a phone call. Lee wonders about the ring's capabilities. Suddenly it gets darker with clouds and Indy shouts at Lee to take off the ring. Lee starts to levitate, while Irina and the gangsters arrive and surround them, along with Soviet soldiers. Lee says he can stop them. Indy says don't use the ring as it wasn't meant for them to use it. Lee is tempted and uses it as a tornado quickly sweeps through some of the Soviets, but sadly includes some of the local populace. Lee tells Indy he can't stop it. Indy starts a fight with some of the Soviet agents and the gang. Irina starts to fight Indy, who defends himself till suddenly a loud shout comes from the distance. The wind dissipates and an army with dark and unknown faces rush through the town and happen to take away Irina as Indy rushes inside a house. It's suddenly quiet and Indy walks out to see Lee handing over the ring to him saying it's over. Unfortunately, the Persian military arrive and take the ring away under the orders of the Prime Minister. Indy and Lee head back to Egypt to Salah's place. They hear on the radio that a military coup happens in Persia which now gives the current Shah of Iran new powers. Indy finds out that the ring has been taken by the British, who made a deal with the Shah of Iran to take the ring for safekeeping by orchestrating the coup. The ring is now in a secret vault belonging to the royal family. As they pack their bags, Salah brings in a British agent, who thanks Indy for finding the ring, but says they want to hire him for a vital mission. Indy says he's done with adventures. However, in comes his ex Marion Ravenwood, who says she may have found the tomb of Alexander the Great. Lee gives the hat back to Indy, and Indy says he'll have one last adventure. What did you think of this version? Could it have worked? Or should it just been a reboot of the franchise? Share your thoughts below, like, subscribe, and thank you for watching In the Plot.